Dzień dobry Państwu. Witam serdecznie w redakcji Gazety Wyborczej. Ladies and gentlemen, I do welcome you at our premises at the editorial office of Gazeta Wyborcza. The conference on Media Freedom Poll 2023, organized by Economia, Reporters Without Borders, Bakala Foundation and supported by Gazeta Wyborcza. Let me present my boss, famous Polish dissident intellectual Adam Michnik, and I'll be translating him. He'll be talking his remarks on Polish. Adamie, proszę bardzo.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Ja niestety nie mówię po angielsku. Mogę mówić po rosyjsku, ale to nie wypada dzisiaj. Po francusku mówię fatalnie, w związku z czym będę mówił po polsku.
Adam Michnik says that unfortunately he doesn't speak English. He could speak Russian, but well, there's no way to speak Russian nowadays. His French is terrible, so that's why he chose to speak Polish.
Inicjatywa tego spotkania, inicjatywa naszych czeskich koleżanek i kolegów, jakby ogniskuje się wokół dwóch ważnych symboli.
There are two symbols on that important initiative of our Czech friends focus on. There are two symbols.
Pierwszy symbol to jest wspólnota wyszehradzka.
The first one is the Visegrad community.
Drugi symbol to jest wolność mediów.
And the second one is the freedom of the media.
Tutaj zacznę od takiego osobistego wspomnienia, że w czasach ustroju słusznie minionego taka oś wspólnoty między ludźmi opozycji demokratycznej w Czechach, w Słowacji, na Węgrzech i w Polsce to była idea wywalczenia wolności.
I would like to start with some, remembering from the past, from the communist past. In the communists, there was a shared value between Poles, Czechs, and Slovaks. There was a value, desire of the freedom and fighting for the freedom.
Mówiliśmy sobie, że wolne słowo to jest ta nasza siła bezsilnych, że zacytuję Václava Havla.
He said that they used to say to each other that their strength, the freedom of the speech is their strength. This is a quote of Václav Havel. This is a strength of the strengthless.
Im więcej pola dla wolnego słowa, tym mniej pola dla dyktatury i na odwrót. Im mniej pola dla wolnych mediów, tym większa moc i większe zagrożenie ze strony dyktatury.
The more place for free speech, the less place for the dictatorship. And the more strength for dictatorship, the less place for the open and free speech.
Wielu obserwatorów podkreśla, że dzisiejszy moment trochę przypomina lata 30. XX wieku. To jest taki moment, gdzie wolność jest permanentnie atakowana przez siły, tendencje, ruchy, hasła autorytarne.
Well, we hear some voices saying that the current situation resembles that what we used to have in 30s and 20th century, that the freedom is being constantly attacked by authoritarian movements, opinions, voices.
To trochę przypomina takie gotowanie żaby. To znaczy żaba gotuje się w temperaturze, która zwolna się ociepla. Bo gdyby od razu wrzucić ją do wrzątku, to by była eksplozja. A tak to jest takie niezauważalne. No.
It's a long process that resembles the way how you could boil a living frog. You can't start it, with a high temperature. You need to increase temperature very slowly, gradually, that the frog didn't, feel it, that something is dangerous. If you start with, high oppression, the frog will jump out of the pot.
Ja to nazywam pełzającym putinizmem.
He calls that crawling Putinism.
To znaczy w Rosji jeszcze 20 lat temu wydawało się, że właściwie wszystko jest po stremu, właściwie nic się nie stało. Zamknęli jedną gazetę, jedną stację, jednego dziennikarza postawili przed sądem. To były takie początki. No.
20 years ago, everybody was saying that nothing bad happened in Russia. Well, just one editorial office was closed, one newspaper was closed, one journalist was put on the trail. But they say, well, that doesn't change anything. But that was the beginning of the evil.
Takie powolne gotowanie żaby.
They slowly cooked the frog.
Na Węgrzech się mówiło o technice salami.
Well, it's another notion, Hungarian one, the salami tactic.
Za to się tnie cienkimi plasterkami. No.
That you cut the salami into very thin slices.
Więc my to w Polsce oglądamy dzisiaj.
And that's what we see now in Poland.
Dlatego jesteśmy bardzo wdzięczni naszym przyjaciołom z Czeskiej Republiki, że ten temat postawili w centrum swojej uwagi. No.
And that's why we are so generous to our Czech friends that they put that important issue on the spotlight.
Ja w latach przed 1980 rokiem pracowałem w podziemnym piśmie Krytyka.
Well, before 1980, he used to work in the underground magazine called Krytyka, The Critics.
Byliśmy bardzo dumni z tego, że w naszej redakcji był wybitny węgierski intelektualista Miklos Haraszti, że współpracował z nami Janusz Kisz.
They were very proud to have Hungarian collaborators in the editorial office and of underground magazine Krytyka. Well, Janusz Kisz, the other one was?
I Miklos Haraszti.
Miklos Haraszti also. Well.
I w stopce redakcyjnej był także Václav Havel.
And there was also the name of Václav Havel issued on the...
I mieliśmy takie poczucie, że albo utoniemy razem, albo się obronimy razem.
And they had a feeling that whether they sing together or they will defend themselves also together.
Jest oczywiście koncepcja Wyszehradu, którą reprezentuje Viktor Orban, którą reprezentował Václav Klaus, którą reprezentował Władimir Mečiar i którą reprezentuje dzisiaj Jarosław Kaczyński, ale jest inna koncepcja naszego Wyszehradu, że razem się obronimy, żeby razem nie utonąć.
Well, of course, there is a notion of Visegrad created by Viktor Orban, Václav Klaus, Władimir Mečiar, and of course Jarosław Kaczyński. But there is our notion, our idea of Visegrad. We'll defend ourselves together.
Thomas Jefferson, jeden z ojców założycieli Stanów Zjednoczonych, powiadał, że wolna gazeta jest ważniejsza niż rząd, bo bez rządu społeczeństwo może istnieć, ale bez wolnego słowa istnieć nie może.
Well, Thomas Jefferson used to say that free journal is more important than the government, because the government can't function. The society can function without the government, but cannot function without free media and free speech.
Witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie w Gazecie Wyborczej, która jest dzieckiem tamtych bojów o wolne media.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do welcome you at our premises in Gazeta Wyborcza, and Gazeta Wyborcza is a child of the effect of that fights we have been having in 80s and 90s for the free media.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam Michnik, for these opening words. Thank you very much for hosting us here today. Thank you also to Gazeta Wyborcza, the offices. It's a wonderful place to present our poll. Thank you also to Reporters Without Borders Austria for backing us. Thank you to the Bakala Foundation to make it possible. My name is Tessa Szyszkowitz. I say that because it's a Polish name, although I don't speak Polish and I'm Austrian, but I'm very honored to be here standing as the chairperson of the Committee for Editorial Independence of the Czech media house Economia. We are here to present the Media Freedom Poll 2023 today, and we also welcome, next to our high-ranking panel of experts, a special guest from Brussels, the Vice President of the Commission, Věra, Jourová, who should be on the line and should appear on the screen behind me, which is not happening at the moment. Let's see if the line, oh, here she is. Mrs. Jourová, can you hear us?
Yes, hello, good morning. Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. Thank you very much for joining us today. I think in order to kick off, it would be wonderful if we all could listen to the main results of the poll that Václav Štětka has prepared for us. He's a lecturer at the Loughborough University in the UK. Václav, can I ask you to come in and give us an overview of what we found this year?
Okay, good morning, everyone. It is indeed my great honor and pleasure to introduce you to the selected outcomes, selected findings from this year's survey on attitudes to media freedom and independence in Central Europe, which has been commissioned by our Committee for Editorial Independence and with a generous support by the Bakala Foundation. But before I jump into the data, just a few words about the overall rationale for this project and the design of the research. So, as I'm sure you know, we've been receiving a lot of reports, studies carried out by independent organizations mapping the state of media freedom and independence in the Central and Eastern European region, and also the threats that media are receiving at the moment. But so far, the audience perspective has been largely missing from these debates, the views of the public on media freedom and independence. So it has been precisely the ambition of our project to fill this gap and to obtain the overall view on people's perspectives on media freedom and independence. Our research has been broadly driven by following research questions. We wanted to know specifically how concerned are people about the current state of media freedom and independence, whether these concerns have changed since last year, because this is the second edition of our poll. The first one was in 2022, so we have comparative data. What do people think should be done to protect media freedom and to support independent journalism, and which are the institutions that people most trust in this regard? And also, what is the perceived importance of certain values that are associated with journalistic professionalism and independence? So the survey has been carried out by the research agency Median, the Czech research agency, in collaboration with local partners on a representative sample of over 4,000 people by using combined online questioning and telephone interviews. And the data were collected last month, so the results are really fresh from the oven, so to speak. So to start with, how concerned are people about the state of media freedom? As you can see from this graph, most people indeed express concerns about the current state of media freedom in their respective countries. The country where people express biggest concerns is Poland, with 71% of people saying that they are indeed concerned, followed by Slovakia with 62%. But even more importantly, these concerns have visibly grown since last year, pretty much in all countries in our poll. The most in Slovakia, from 49% to 62%, of people saying that they are worried, they are concerned about the state of media freedom. Breaking down these concerns by age categories, we can clearly see that it's generally the older people who express more concerns about media freedom than the younger generations, with one exception, and the exception is Slovakia. If you can see that graph in the upper right-hand corner, the youngest cohort of Slovaks, 18 to 24 years, actually express more concerns than people who are in their 30s and 40s. I'm sure this is something to unpack in the subsequent discussion. Apart from age, the concerns about media freedom are clearly also driven by political preferences. In all countries, except for Slovakia, where the picture is a bit more complicated, but in most other countries, it is the voters of parties that are currently in opposition who are expressing visibly more concerns about media freedom than the voters of parties currently in power. Voters of Fidesz, on the bottom left-hand corner, are the ones that are actually the only voters across the whole poll who express visibly more satisfaction with the level of media freedom than concerns about it. What are the threats to media freedom that people see currently? So here there's a clear division between among the countries. In Poland and Hungary, it is the government that is seen currently as the biggest threat to media freedom. And in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, on the other hand, it is the media owners, advertisers, and other business interests who are perceived to be endangering media freedom the most. How do people assess the importance of independent media? Just like last year, we've learned that vast majority of people actually does value media independence from political interference and government censorship. But again, we have seen in most countries an increase in this perceived importance of having politically independent media. The biggest increase was in Poland by 5 percentage points. And it's not just the perceived importance of independence media that people value more this year than the previous year. It's also the editorial autonomy. We've asked people about whether they think that media owners should have a right to tell their journalists what to write or think. And we have learned that the majority of people don't think that media owners should have that right to unduly influence the content of media. And again, this percentage, this agreement, or rather to say disagreement with this proposition has increased compared to last year. The highest increase was in Hungary, 11 percentage points. People also, on the majority, don't think that the government should have a right to influence the content of public service media. So again, people seem to value editorial independence of public service media from the government's interferences. And again, we've seen the increase of this agreement in almost all countries apart from Czech Republic. People also generally express high agreement with editorial autonomy from any external interferences. But compared to these previous two slides, on this one we have actually seen a slight decline in the agreement on this question. The biggest drop was in the Czech Republic. So we've seen already that people place a great, people express relatively great, high concerns about media freedom, but who do they trust? Which institutions do they trust to protect media freedom? So it turns out that people in all countries of our sample trust the professional journalistic associations the most when it comes to who should be protecting media freedom, followed by journalists themselves, apart from Hungary, where actually it's the European Union, which comes as close second institution that is trusted the most to protect media freedom. However, it has to be pointed out that in most cases people are rather divided on this topic. These are average numbers, mean scores, so clearly oscillating around the middle of the scale. What should be done in practical terms to safeguard media freedoms? That's another set of questions we asked people about. And just like last year, we learned that most people are in support of stronger legislation, stronger national legislation to safeguard media freedom and independence. And again, we've seen an increase in the percentage of people who believe that this should be done, especially in Poland and Slovakia. On the other hand, when we ask people about a means of economic support by the state for media independence, for example, by means of tax reliefs or subsidies, people are much more divided on this question. There's no real agreement. The Poles are relatively the most supportive for economic means of supporting media freedom, but the Czechs disagree quite vehemently on this issue. And just like last year, the majority of people are in favor of the European Union imposing sanctions on countries who interfere with media freedom. The highest percentage is seen in Slovakia. Also, Czech Republic has seen an increase in the agreement on this topic. Among the new items on our survey this year have been a set of questions asking people to tell us about certain values and practices, editorial practices that they themselves see as important when it comes to making their news choices. And we've learned that indeed a majority of people believe that the media, that it's important for them that the media they consume do not display any links to political parties, that they produce content that is truthful and factually accurate, and that they also emphasize factual information rather than just their own point of view. We've asked people about opinions on media ownership regulation specifically. So you remember from the previous slides that people are aware of certain negative consequences of ownership on editorial freedom. But what about the regulation of media ownership? So it turns out that most people agree that there should be limits on media ownership in the hands of one single owner. In Hungary, the percentage of agreement is visibly lower, below 50%. And most people also agree that it is important for the public to know who the owners are. In other words, people are in support of greater media ownership transparency. Again, Hungary is a bit of an outlier with visibly lower percentage of agreement on this item. The last section of our survey that I'm going to present concerns opinions of people on the regulation of online content. And it turns out the data show that majority of people think that digital platforms should boost visibility of trustworthy information sources. They should emphasize trustworthy sources over those ones that are known to disseminate disinformation. They also believe, by majority, that online media should be regulated to prevent from spreading hate speech, spreading harmful content, even though the percentage of agreement varies across the countries. In Poland, it's very high, 71%. In Czech Republic, not as high, below 50%. And most people also believe that a stronger action should be taken against the spreading of online disinformation. There's a clear consensus on that. So these slides, these graphs show that people are clearly aware of certain problems that are associated with what's going on in the online environment, and they feel like something should be done to tackle these problems. But that doesn't mean that people would give a green light to the governments to actually block online content for the reasons, for example, of national security. In most countries, more people agree than disagree on this item, but there is a clear division, not a unanimous, certainly not a majority agreement. And in Hungary, actually, as you can see, the disagreement prevails. So I will stop my short tour through these preliminary results at this moment. There's more to be presented. There's more actually on our website. If you're interested in more detailed findings, please go to our website where a full version of these results is available. But I'm sure that already a lot has been presented that needs to be unpacked and that will be commented on in the subsequent panel discussion. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Václav, for the hard work also you put in the last month into getting this poll out and back with the results. Thank you very much. Can we, in order to have the most of Věra Jourová, who will have to leave before the end of the presentation, so if we could have her back on the screen now, we could actually ask her for a first reaction to the results of this poll. Vice President Jourová, thank you very much for listening to also all the results of the poll. I was wondering if you look at the results, especially concerning the role of the European Union in protecting media freedom, it seems that you have a very clear mandate, because a lot of people in the four Visegrad states think actually that the European Union is more important as a protector than their own governments, which should be quite concerning for the governments, but it is also something where you come in as a protective force. What is it in concrete that you can do to protect media freedom?
Yes, thank you very much. Once again, good morning. You see, I speak under the control of Václav Havel and Anna Politkovskaya, who are for me the biggest authorities, who always tell me every day that there is more place, when there is more place for free speech, then less place for authoritarianism. So this is what I wanted to say at the beginning, also as a reaction on what Adam Michnik said at the beginning of this meeting. The results of the survey made me happy. That there are not many things which make me happy in these days, but I have to say that I very much esteem the trust which I see from the results of the survey, the trust towards the EU, that the EU could be the power to set the fair rules, the media in the whole EU. Of course, we are aware, when I say we, I mean the Commission and myself, we are aware that with the power or the space to regulate or to introduce the rules, a big responsibility is coming. And this is exactly what I am aware of, what I've been reminded every day when discussing with different stakeholders the future shape and scope of the Media Freedom Act. We keep discussing, in fact, the balance of powers in the EU. And by this media law, we try to come with the right balance for the EU member states themselves, who are ones who should be more protected by this law, because by this law we try to create good working conditions, good space for the media, high level of legal certainty that nobody will interfere into editorial content, neither the EU nor member states or politics, nor the business and the owners. So for the media, this media law should serve as a kind of safety net or some kind of I don't know, privileged treatment, if you want to hear that. And still, with balancing the powers, I have to add the platforms, the digital platforms, because they have grabbed too much power and not enough responsibility. And so the Media Freedom Act, which we proposed, is trying to deliver this balance and to increase the protection. And this survey gives me quite a boost on Monday morning that we should try hard to make or keep the Media Freedom Act alive through the legislative process, because now we have the European Parliament and the member states assessing the Media Freedom Act as the Commission proposed it, and the sharp period for negotiations will start this year in autumn. We are also working on strengthening security of journalists and decreasing the possibility of those who want to abuse justice system against the journalist by the anti-SLAPP legislation. So I am encouraged by the survey. I cooperate with Mr. Štětka and his team also when it comes to the Media Pluralism Monitor, which is the annual survey covering the whole Europe, not only V4, and the results of this survey seem to me that they are in kind of correlation with the results of this bigger survey which covers the whole EU. However, I would not like to draw simplified conclusions out of this survey. The encouragement for the EU is there. I don't want to put this into question, but on the other hand, the concerns the people are expressing when it comes to media independence, I would like to look into the methodology or the definitions which you used in the survey, because several things seem to me a bit confusing. For instance, the high concern from the side of the voters of the party of Mr. Kotleba in Slovakia. Do they really have concerns about the independence of media, or do they express this view because they and similar parties and similar voters keep saying that the media are lying and that there is a censorship? So I'd like to look into the methodology. This is not the expression of doubt, but rather the desire to know more about the definitions and about the parameters of the questioning. Last comment: the people would like us to sanction the breaches of the how to say, media independence. Indeed, I have to mention the fact, now I will sound like a boring lawyer, that we cannot impose any sanctions without having any law. So this is the purpose of the Media Freedom Act also, to have such law which will enable us to eventually sanction those who will be in breach with this law. Thank you. Sorry, I was long maybe.
No. Well, that was just wonderful, and we would need about 2 hours not to go into detail in everything you mentioned. If we can focus on one more thing on the European Media Freedom Act that you are preparing. If I understand you say it's supposed to be a safety net for everyone involved and not so much a sanctioning institution act. But in the case now of how the reaction went in different countries, it came as a surprise to me as an Austrian citizen that the resistance against the European Media Freedom Act seems to come not only from the usual suspects, the governments of Poland and Hungary, but also from governments in Germany and in Austria and some others who maybe did not understand the concept of pan-European solidarity with journalists under pressure from more authoritarian governments. And it also comes, this resistance, from the publishers. So can you elaborate on how you're trying to find a compromise in the next month until the Media Freedom Act should be presented?
Yes, it was not such a surprise for me that we didn't only hear the criticism, for instance, from Poland and Hungary, which put into question the mere competence of the EU to legislate in this field. But it was not a surprise that the criticism came from the countries which are telling us we have absolutely perfect system which does not need any improvements. And sometimes I hear even arrogant messages like, what are you doing, Commission? You want to repair things in Poland and Hungary, so you will destroy the things in the rest of Europe where we, as the masters of protection of media, have old tradition, and when we have a fantastic system. I have, and the publishers, it's for the first time they should be forced to cope with any kind of European legislation. So again, not a surprise from the opinion of the publishers. So what my arguments are for those who think that their system is fantastic and doesn't need any improvement. I have two messages. Politics can go mad everywhere. No country is immune, and I hear it also from the journalists from even the best countries, best from the point of view of the traditional protection, like the Scandinavian countries. So such a safety net at European level might be everywhere. The second argument for the best in the classroom, what they think they are the best, like Germany, Austria, Scandinavian countries. Last week I heard it in Holland. My argument is we are proposing minimum harmonization. In other words, those who have higher standards, of course, can keep them and can continue maybe serving as a good inspiration for the states where the system is not so well established. And it's especially the case of the Central and East European countries. So my argument is we are not going to demolish the things which work. We want to increase the protection where it's objectively needed. And for the publishers, yes, so we want to harmonize the rules which create a better protection for the media. I will always repeat that this is not regulating media themselves, but the space for the media, so that the media can survive and can play the role in democratic society. And we need desperately them to play the role in modern democracies. So there is the only one article in the Media Freedom Act which obliges the media to do something concrete, and it's the disclosure of the ownership, because we believe that transparency of the ownership will be very useful and good step forward. So these are my arguments. I will, I am a person of compromises, and compromise is not a bad word in Europe, I guess. But when I think something is really substantial, something really matters, then I can strongly promote the best possible solution. So the negotiations between the parliament and the member states, which will be influenced by heavy lobbying, I can imagine we are already there. I still believe that these negotiations can produce the final solution, which will make European media stronger and enjoying higher legal certainty and better perspectives. This is what we all need.
I would love to ask many more questions myself, but I would also like to give one question to the floor before you have to leave us, especially from the Polish journalists who are here. Is there a question that you would like to ask from the floor, please? There's one question here in the back. Please, can you introduce yourself so that we know who you are? Oh, and you need a microphone.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mrs. Vice President. This is Michał Wawrykiewicz.
Hi.
I'm actually, hi. I'm not actually a journalist. I'm a lawyer, and I would like to focus your attention on one more very important aspect and a factor that we didn't discuss today. I mean, the rule of law, the independence of courts, independence of judiciary in Poland. That we have a very serious problem as we all know, with that aspect. And this is literally connected. The freedom of media and the freedom of judiciary is literally connected. So without the independence of judiciary, we cannot protect and we cannot guarantee the freedom of media. Today, we have completely paralyzed, for example, the Supreme Court. The civil chamber of the Supreme Court is completely paralyzed in Poland. We have the majority of neo-judges, so-called neo-judges, I mean judges who are appointed by the government to the Supreme Court in this chamber, in the civil chamber, and we have also the president of the civil chamber of the Supreme Court, which is also neo-judge, appointed by the government. So imagine the case, because I could tell you more about it, but just one case. Imagine the case, the civil case between a journalist or the newspaper and the state or someone who is related to the state. And this case finally will go to the civil chamber of the Supreme Court, and you have completely stacked case. You have lost case at the beginning because this court is not independent. This court is completely paralyzed by the government. So this is the situation that we have to talk also about when it comes to the freedom of media.
Was that a question? The question would be...
That was actually the question to Mrs. Vice President, how you can see this perspective. I mean, the protection of the freedom of media in the relation with the protection of the independence of judiciary.
Thank you.
Yes, of course, you know very well that I have both things on my table, and we started to deal with the rule of law as the basic principle in the EU, as with much broader field than only judiciary. And that's why in our rule of law report, which will be issued in July, you will see in many countries the recommendations which cover both independence of judiciary and independence of media. So these are two connected things. When one works and the other one does not, then the country has an issue in the rule of law as such. So I fully understand why you are stressing the need to have independent judiciary in the country. In Poland, we have a lot of issues. The pressure from the Commission is continuing. You know well the cases of laws which we put to the table of the European Court of Justice, the issue of the questioned primacy of the EU law, and so on. But I still believe that there might be some achievements. For instance, we propose the anti-SLAPP legislation, which obliges the member states to create the changes in the procedural rules of mainly of the civil law procedures, to dismiss the case at the beginning when it will become obvious that this is an abusive litigation, only to silence the journalists. You will say, yes, indeed, it requires independent judge, independent court. Yes, we propose this anti-SLAPP legislation counting on having the independent judiciary and independent judges in every country. So we will see how it works. You said that these litigations are parked or how did you say it? Frozen or paralyzed. We want these cases to be dismissed at the beginning when the abusive nature of the litigation will become obvious to the independent judge. So, as you said, we need maybe two hours to speak about these matters. I have to say that I was concerned in and still keeping the topic of the need to have independent judiciary. I realized this when during the COVID emergency regimes, some member states introduced into their criminal laws the articles which might enable them to criminalize those who write or say things against the government. And I have to say that I was concerned about that, because such an article could be easily abused by the state power against the journalists. And I remember myself referring always to the national courts. They have to be the decisive power, the decisive actor to say, yes, there was a crime, or no, this is just the harassment of the journalists from the side of the state. And I have to say, I was really nervous about this, because these were the moments when I realized that in a strong, healthy democracy, which will survive testing crisis, which was the COVID and now is the war, that in such democracies we need both independent and strong media, but also independent and strong judiciary sphere. Sorry, it was again very, very long answer, but it's not a trivial issue. Thank you.
No, it's not. It's very complex, and thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Vice President, for joining us also today. I know how busy your day is. We will now sort of return to the panel and go into sort of from the European level a little bit more on the 4 states present also here on the panel. So thank you very much to Brussels.
Thank you. I would wish to be with you in Warsaw. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
And let's swiftly come now to because we are in Warsaw, I wanted to ask Bart from Gazeta Wyborcza here on the panel. We heard already now about the judicial situation being tough here. I wanted to ask you how, in the light of the results of the polls, where you see how severely the respondents said that they feel that the independence of the freedom of media is threatened, how this plays out in this year in particular under the situation that you will have national elections here in the fall, and that you are very, very close to a very, very brutal war that changes the entire situation of Europe as we have known it so far.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, seeing the results, I'm relieved that we are not the only ones here in Gazeta Wyborcza who perceive the situation grave and disastrous. Well, 71% concerned. Well, that says a lot. That says that, well, a part of, well, minority. My countrymen share the view that the media are in danger and the media are essential. And if you look to other polls, well, one of the first decisions of the regime which governs in Poland was to take over the public television radio and turn it into, well, Russian-style propaganda, which is simply unheard of. Well, you can't watch it. Well, you could become insane by watching all those lies repeated on the TV screen by the governmental journalists or so-called journalists, glorifying the government and admonishing the opposition, the people who oppose the government, and even among the supporters of the PIS party. Well, only 85% believes that this propaganda in TV is something which has a value, which is true. They simply believe to that what they watch on public television. So even among the voters, people who intend to vote for the government in fall, there are 15% who doesn't simply buy it. That shows the scope, the problem we had with the media. Media were devastated by the government, were devastated on purpose. Long before Jarosław Kaczyński took over the power in Poland, he declared that the media are, well, lying, are unpolish, are unpatriotic, and should be, well, taken on a short leash. It was not Donald Trump who invented all those invectives on crooked media, biased media, and so on. No, it happened here in Poland, in this very city. We had it many times, and unfortunately we ignored it. We didn't believe it could happen. Impossible. Wow. Nowadays, we were facing another act of this war against the media, and the main target of the government is TVN, which is the largest private television in Poland, and other electronic media. The government, that controls the Council of Radio and Television, which is a state controller of electronic media in Poland, tries to intimidate electronic media and threatens and even pushes more and more forward to simply switch them off, delegalize them, take the concession, the license back from them. If TVN broadcasts something critical to the government, something the government doesn't like, the Council of the Radio and Television starts investigations. Well, after a few months, maybe before the elections, the Council may say that we have so many infractions, so many problems with this television that we have no choice, we have to switch it off. That's the real scenario in Poland. The same concerns the Radio Talk, which belongs to Agora, and the same concerns Radio Z. So you publish something which is, well, this is news. For instance, that, well, the man of the president of Polish Parliament is being kept on the hospital in the intensive care unit for months. He should be, well, discharged, sent back home, or sent back to the special care unit. No, he's still in the hospital on the intensive care. Well, scandalous fact was revealed by the journalists of Radio Z, and only because of that, the chairman of the Council of the Radio started an investigation, and the aim of this investigation is to intimidate the journalist, intimidate the radio, and in the future simply shut it off. So this is a draconian way, but probably that we will face right before the election. Just imagine the electoral campaign, extremely heated situation, and suddenly the government decides to, well, simply kill most important electronic media in Poland. It will be a huge blow for the democratic society, and this is what could happen.
Is the modern warfare of the government against the media more focused on the electronic media, on TV and mass media, or do you feel it personally as a journalist of Gazeta Wyborcza also?
Well, the Gazeta Wyborcza has been victim of first month of this government. All subscriptions were cancelled, so the government stopped reading us. All advertisement we had with advertisement deal we had with state-owned company were also cancelled. So they have paid the fines, but simply stop sending us any money. If you have the survey, the data on how governmental bodies and state-owned companies support the media, well, you see that the only thing they are paying us for are the obituaries. Sometimes some important artist or other person died, and, well, they want to commemorate him also on our pages. So we receive almost nothing, and the right-wing outlets, they get, billions, simply billions. Also for nothing, because they are not being read. It's just, throwing money away. And this is economical pressure, and the other thing is that they are simply harassing us with slaps. Gazeta Wyborcza has been sued more than 100 times since 2015. And recently the record was broken. We got 10 lawsuits for one story. Just imagine 10.
What was the story?
There was a story, well, on shabby dealings in the Ministry of Health. And the business partner of the Ministry of Health sued us 10 times for a story. This is a typical slap. And this is a double suing, because they sue us separately for the publication online and the publication in print. So, and they sue, well, there's an extremely funny story with one minister, a minister of justice, who is at the same time the prosecutor general. Sometimes we are being sued by the minister, sometimes we are sued by the prosecutor general. This is the same person, and sometimes both. This is, well, another story. And there was an attempt to, well, to issue a huge blow on the entire media market, the revenue tax. In 2021, the government suddenly invented the idea how to boost the health system, and they wanted to introduce a special tax on the revenues from advertisement. That would have meant that we were to pay 15% for each zloty we get from the advertisement. We, the cinemas, well, book publishers, everybody who publish anything related to the advertisement. There was the first time media in Poland together rebelled against the government. For the one day in February 2021, we stopped broadcasting for an entire day. In the television, you had the black screen. In radio, you had just an announcement. There is a protest. On internet portal, also black screen with an announcement, this is a protest. The government, for the first time, they were shocked. They believed the media will never unite themselves. There are huge concurrence and divisions and so on. No, the first time we united themselves and the government had to back off. But it doesn't mean they will not return to this idea after the election if they win. If they win the elections, it will be extremely hard for free media in this country because they will have to finish us up. Knowing that, well, the Prime Minister said openly, the media belongs to his opponents and enemies. Well, there's a clear declaration how they perceive us.
Quite shocking to hear this. And we always think that Poland is not as bad as Hungary in the respect of media freedom. If I can move to Veronika. Veronika, you see in the polls that there is, of course, huge concern. That's not a surprise that people are concerned about media freedom under Orban's regime anymore. But there's also a lot of concern about transparency and ownership and concentration. Could you comment on that? Because you have fought your own fight for an independent outlet and be an independent journalist in this situation. So how do you see the results of this poll this year?
Yeah, you are right. I wasn't surprised when I saw the results. I've been working as a journalist and editor in the last 2 decades in Hungary, so I've seen how the media freedom situation declined, but it was good to see that there are more people compared to last year who concerned of this situation. But at the same time, you know, the Hungarian media field and also the attitudes toward it are extremely divided by political beliefs in my country, and you can see it from the results if you break it down from who the voters are, what the voters are, Fidesz voters think about the media freedom, then you can see that how is it divided, that they seems to be much more okay with this situation where and as regards of the media ownership, the vast majority of the media companies and media organizations are somehow belongs to people who have strong connections to the government or who are loyal to the government. And yeah, regarding the transparency, to answer your question, it's really appreciated that the EU and the Commission is preparing the European Media Act and then concentrating on transparency. But the thing is, in Hungary, it's really transparent that the vast majority of the companies belong to people who have strong political interest. We have this very unique organization called CESMA. The English name is Central European Press and Media Foundation, where more than 500 media outlets are being operated in a very centralized way. Basically, all of the radio stations, all of the county newspapers belong there, and their sole purpose basically is to distribute the political messages of the ruling party. But there are still some remaining independent ones who can still operate. Almost all of them, almost all of us somehow started to rely on readers' revenue, and we basically turned to the readers and asked them that, look, if you want to consume fact-based quality journalism, then you need to contribute somehow financially. So that's how it's provided in my country, that there are still news, there are still possibility to consume facts. Unfortunately, mostly only online, so people who are not having their news and having the facts on the internet, they have much less opportunities to find any other things that the governmental propaganda.
Well, I mean, you have shown with your Telex adventure that you can be also, so far at least, successful in pushing back even to a very, very authoritarian approach by a government. I'm wondering if I can bring in Martin Ehl from the Czech Republic. Unfortunately, we don't have also a colleague from from Slovakia here. So maybe you can cover a little bit both in your answer, because we can see what Veronika is mentioning, and what we see in the poll results also is that people are very concerned about government interference, but they also, the question is if the respondents don't trust also the journalists necessarily, because they sometimes even see the European Union as more trustworthy as protector than the journalists themselves. So what's the message for us all? What's the message for journalists? What can we do to push back, to be independent, and also to deal with the challenges of the 21st century, meaning that we have to go online more, that we have to be maybe more flexible in finding sources for revenues?
As I was telling when we were preparing this debate, that I'm a little bit fed up with all the grievances journalists are voicing all around from basically 2008, when the traditional model of business model of media broke down, and everybody is looking for some solution. Everybody is experimenting with anything, and we have a quite interesting example in our region, which is in Slovakia, Slovak Daily N, Deník N, where, and this is for me partial explanation of one of these graphs we have seen about the concerns of young Slovaks, that Slovakia has made a nationwide experiment of a system called Piano of payment. And it wasn't successful in terms of business, but it was successful in terms of teaching Slovaks to pay for the quality news or quality journalism, general. And then on this, people who created Piano then founded this Daily N, which was pushed, similarly to Telex, from one financial group which went into buying the stakes in one of the media houses in Slovakia. Part of the journalists decided they don't want to go with this, and then they created this new daily, and they had the advantage to create something completely new with the new technologies, with the new ideas, which many of us working for the traditional media houses do not have. And they created a new model. And for me, it's a kind of the part of the reply or response to these grievances, that you can find some kind of business model where you can produce quality journalism. I was just checking last numbers. So the Daily N was created in 2014. They got big money from one of the private companies, but as far as they declared, they didn't use any of this money because the Slovaks were used to pay, and there was a wave of support for them. So they were able to develop their project. They now have economic daily in their group. They have a Hungarian language daily in their group. They are producing books as well, and now they have, at least in their last quarterly report, they have 60,000 paying subscribers in Slovakia, 5 million market, so 5 million people. So for me, it's a kind of example that if you have good ideas, if you are inventive enough, then it is possible to do something.
Thank you very much, Martin. I think I would like to ask Dorota maybe to come in at that point, because Dorota Nyberg is a Polish journalist who has experienced what could result in grievances towards a government trying to interfere in her work as an independent journalist. She's also a correspondent of Reporters Without Borders. Dorota, how do you see how much journalists can push back in a situation like in the Polish situation?
Yes, it's a tough question because to push back in Poland means sometimes to lose your job or to be removed for your duties, as was in my case. And I was listening to the discussion about judiciary, and I was thinking, yes, we need it really, and I could feel it in my judicial process. And we need judges who specialize in press freedom, I think, and who specialize in slaps as well. And this is really crucial for us because I lost in second instance. My appeal was rejected by Supreme Court, which is really unfortunate because I feel it's really important case about journalistic ethics. But now we send it to Strasbourg, to European Court of Human Rights, and I hope it will be accepted. We don't have an answer yet.
But please, Dorota, can you tell us exactly what happened?
A short story. I will try to make it short. I was told by my bosses to publish a story from our correspondent in Italy. They wanted to cover us the certain subject, and it was the story about a priest who was attacked by a man in the church. Attacked meant the man went into the church and wanted money for the priest, and then the priest said no, and he spotted on the priest and left the church, and that was the whole story. So, because that was the decision of the bosses, of course we covered that. I was editor that day, and I was responsible for final publication. So when I got the story on my desk, I saw that there is a national origin of the perpetrator in the story. So, because he was a Moroccan. So I had to make a quick decision. I mean, working in the newsroom of Polish radio, you don't have very much time. So it has to be rather quick. So I decided to take away the nationality of this man because I thought it was not relevant to the story. Everyone could do that. The nationality was not relevant here. So that was the case, and I was threatened then to be fired, and that was in the end removed from my position of an editor and to the documentation department. So I sued Polish radio for discrimination, and I won in the first instance and I lost in the second, but the case is about journalistic ethics, to be able to say no to your boss if you think it is against journalistic ethics. So I think it's quite important. But I would like, if I may, also comment on the survey, and editorial independence from my point of view is really important. So thank you for this job. But we see from the survey that there is a decline in all countries in support of editorial independence in newsrooms, which is really worrying. I think what you have to be able to see here is the role of the state in all of these countries, because we know that in these countries the state is very keen to take control over the media. In Poland, you can see it when the state oil company bought actually the publishing house from the German owner and controls now more than 20 regional dailies. So you can ask yourself, how can you keep an eye on the authorities if you are working for the state? This can be really tricky. So the boundaries between the state and the media are raises and this is really, yes, worrying process. The same is when you say about public media, the philosophy of the Polish government, and they say it very openly, is that you're supposed to have a public media as a voice of a government. You're supposed to tell people how world looks like from the point of view of the government, and it's supposed to be all right because of the democratic choice. And this is really against all the European recommendation of public media, and we know that this is not real public media. Real public media is supposed to be impartial. So here people can also be a little bit confused, right? Because you have these countries which have the experience of communism, the experience of censorship. Maybe you can have this confusion, okay, so what is editorial independence, and is it really okay to have this kind of public media, and is it really okay to have these dailies which are owned by the state?
Absolutely, thank you very much for that. The question of the editorial independence especially under more and more authoritarian governments is, of course, the main issue that we see in Hungary also. Erhard, if I can bring in Erhard Stackl for Reporters Without Borders Austria. If you look at these results and of the concerns also that Dorota now mentioned, the protective force is seen in the poll, not only the European Union, but also journalistic associations. So where does this bring in, for example, Reporters Without Borders and the responsibility you have, and what you can see in the data where you can help also to protect journalists in countries where they feel under threat?
Well, it was interesting to see in the survey of the Visegrad countries that the public is putting high hopes, or some hope at least, in the journalist associations and in the European Union. As far as the journalist associations are concerned, my assumption is they're mainly thinking about trade unions or national journalist associations, but international ones also are playing a role, as for instance Reporters Without Borders. And Reporters Without Borders has created a kind of the hard currency of the ranking of media freedom in the world. 180 countries are measured each and every year. The next index will come out next week on May the 3rd, International Day of Press Freedom. And the last poll from 2022 was showing similarities to the outcome of the survey here. As for instance, 180 countries, I said, on top is Norway, it's the best. 180 is North Korea, so you can see somewhere in between. And Hungary is in position 85, which is quite bad for a European country. Poland, 66. According to this poll, the Czech Republic and Slovenia are faring much better. Czech Republic is in position 20 and Slovakia in 27. And one thing that is especially interesting for me, my country, Austria, in 2021 used to be in position 17 and in 22, 31. So this means it's quite a lot worse than the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Why is that so? Because we also have problems that are quite similar. There are a mixture of problems that have been mentioned here, not all of them, luckily, but some of them. For instance, public service media under political pressure and with a lack of transparency on the one side. On the other side, there is a huge scandal in Austria about massive allocation of government spending for advertisements to a special group of media reporting favorable about the government. And there is a suspicion that there is a criminal plot, a mixture of bribery and blackmail, where some newspaper owners received enormous amounts of money from government for advertising and giving back the favor with favorable reporting. And the special public prosecutor is investigating this case. So we have heard from Vice President Jourová this idea that we need a safety net for all of Europe, and it's just what I would like to make the case, because as you have said, Tessa, in Germany and Austria, the newspaper publishers and other media people, they're strongly opposed to any kind of regulations from Brussels, because they say, no, in our part of the world everything is fine, so we are against this. And what the international groups like ours can do, we are in contact, we are in dialogue, our headquarters in Paris is in dialogue with the European Commission. This doesn't mean we are giving carte blanche to everything that they want, But for instance, the ban on spying on journalists is important. The transparency of media ownership, newsroom independence, and also the limitation and the fairness of distribution of government advertising and many other things. So what we are trying to do is to create awareness to the public for this is an enormous problem in some of the countries, but it is a looming problem all over. And if you take into account the spreading of fake news, it gets even worse. So I will take with me this survey also as an input for our argumentation vis-à-vis our audiences to make clear that this is necessary to find solutions on the European level.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important point also that you point out that the previous Austrian government is under investigation for media corruption, and that shows us how thin the ice is that we are all walking on, even if we don't have authoritarian governments pressing on us. Václav Pecha, if I can ask you, if you look closer at the media poll results, we see, for example, that young people are often less concerned about editorial independence, maybe because they have a totally different approach to reading news. And also, it depends very much on who votes for what, if we see the concern is higher or lower. Could you comment on what do you think was for you the most important takeaway from the poll?
Thank you. Thank you, Tessa. Thank you to the organizers and Václav. Thank you for such hard work. To your point, concern that I have is the low concern of the media threat in case of Czech Republic and measured against the Slovaks. And Martin mentioned it. I don't know if maybe there's a Kuciak effect as well, where we see the Slovaks, especially in the young group, being super interested in journalism. And we're in a business of running national and international journalism programs, and we see the worse the governments are faring, the higher the number of applications from these countries. So we see Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary spiking. So that's one of the I think most important things. That I see in this. For some reason, the Czech youth is not concerned, and maybe that's a question to to Václav. What does it mean? Does it really mean that the Czech media landscape is free and of no worries to the youth? Or is there something else? Is there maybe a carelessness behind it? As far as editorial independence, when we ask our young, inspiring journalists about editorial independence, they sometimes have no idea what it is because they simply don't read the newspapers. Okay, so that's maybe something to think about. How to attract youth to fair journalism. My last point is that this data, and we're happy to support this. We supported last year. We supported this year. We'll at some point make the data available to a wider public. So if anyone is interested in reusing that for purposes, it has to have a okay from Václav and a foundation. But we're happy to share these findings further. So that's about it. I just one thing, we've seen the deterioration of the media freedoms. Hungary has been the outlier last year. All of a sudden, we've got two outliers. Poland, and I hear the grievances. I wonder what is it? If V4 countries are simply turning the heat on under the pot. That frogs, as Adam Michnik mentioned. Where does it stop? And hopefully, I don't know if Vice President Jourová is still there. I'm not sure if the Media Freedom Act is the only answer to that. I think it's much of a larger problem we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Václav. I mean, we would like to open the debate finally also to people in the auditorium. We don't have huge time, so please think the questions you want to ask and ask them, and also say to who you want to address them, and bring in new debate questions would be also great. I also see my committee member Alexander Bochert of Germany here in the auditorium, so it would be nice also to hear your view on the poll results. But I had a question here from you. Can you please say who you are?
Thank you very much. Is this working? It's working? Yeah. Okay, Krzysztof Bobiński, I'm from the Society of Journalists, which is a small group of journalists, working for media freedom. This survey shows, sorry I was late, but from what I saw, the survey shows that the Media Freedom Act to a great extent addresses the concerns of populations in our 4 countries. The question is, why are the journalists not in our 4 countries not very interested in the European Media Freedom Act? Why are journalists in Poland, I understand also in the Czech Republic, obviously in Hungary it's difficult, are not reporting on what's happening with the European Media Freedom Act? Why are they not writing about the implications of the European Media Freedom Act, which is a Magna Carta for journalism in Europe? It's a historic, actually, move. You may complain that it doesn't go far enough, but Věra Jourová has broken a lot of taboos putting this forward, and now you can see that she's rather worried about the future of the Act. So this is a question to actually everyone here in the panel. The second question is also to everyone in the panel. Why are the publishers in Europe against the European Media Freedom Act? Why are public relations people from the publishers, like Springer, going around countries like Poland and the Czech Republic, as I'm told, telling people that there's something wrong with the European Media Freedom Act, that actually it's an anti-Media Freedom Act, that, you know, be careful with this act, because once it's passed, then the Commission will take over all our publications. And really, we've heard from the Polish publishers, of whom Agora, the publisher of Gazeta Wyborcza, is a member, that they would prefer the European Media Freedom Act to be thrown out completely. My third question is, when I think we've had an hour and a half of complaining. I think we should stop complaining about what's happening, because we all know what's happening. When will we start cooperating in the 4 countries, the journalist associations in our 4 countries, together to support media freedom? We're all working separately, and we should actually start working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these very important questions. I think Bart and Veronika, maybe Bart, you could also discuss, both of you, why there's not a lot of response coming often on the EMFA from the countries themselves. And also Alexandra, then afterwards, maybe you can comment on the publishers in Germany a little bit. Thank you.
Well, I believe that the problem is that it tackles also a business sphere of well, our work. And the other issue is that, well, Democrats in Poland stopped or lost confidence on the European Union on dealing with such an issue. Because for last, well, 8 years, we've been observing, incapacity of European Union to deal with the problem of rule of law in Poland, which is fundamental. And you can't have, well, free independent media without rule of law, without, this cornerstone of democracy. What if I will have a right, if there will be no court? Where could I go and complain against those who violates my right? And the European Union was addressing this issue for 8 years without any very visible effect. The government is still pushing its agenda, well, decreasing the liberty, independence of judges, doing everything to re-establish, well, a rather communist way of governing the country. And European Union is observing that, well, not totally passively, but of course it could have been done less. And among, well, those part of the society who is democratic, pro-European, engaged, there is a rising frustration in the European Union. Maybe that's the answer. But, well, you're definitely right. We should talk about this solution more and discuss it and make it a a public issue, not only an issue being discussed, in companies by CEOs on closed meeting of publishers. This is also a problem of discussion on Europe in Poland. We discuss Europe on closed meetings among experts, and we don't discuss it with the society. And suddenly it comes an issue of migration, for instance, which is an European issue. And we don't have the arguments. We can, persuade people that something is right to do, something is wrong to do, and then that's how it works. So yeah, perfectly right. We shall discuss it more.
Thanks for the questions. I totally agree with you. I also fed up with all of the complaining that journalists are doing in the past 10 years. That's why I was talking about one solution, which is turning to the readers, make them understand and educate them that it's up to them, that they need to somehow willing to participate in this whole media freedom universe in terms of not just paying for newspapers on the streets, at the newsstands, but online as well. And regarding the media, and of course media literacy is also a key, starting in a very early age and make young people understand that how journalism, quality journalism is done, and how why is it an expensive stuff to do? Because, and I'm talking about the financial aspects, because my honest belief is that we talk about independency, but editorial independence, behind the editorial independency, the key is the financial independency. And regarding your remark about the Media Freedom Act, I don't share your belief that it's not being discussed. As I mentioned before, the Hungarian media scene is divided, and there are some great analyses and discussions regarding the Media Freedom Act on one part of the Hungarian outlets. But what I see is that since we don't really see that what's going to be the consequences if some government harms the proposed sections of the Media Act, I think the Hungarian public and even the media organizations are quite skeptical about it, because as far as I'm familiar with the proposal, if the government gonna point that supposedly independent body that provides some kind of regulatory issues or make what's going to happen if you harm this or that, then in my country it's just not going to be a great solution. So maybe that's behind the skepsis in Hungary, as far as I think.
Alexandra, would you comment on the publishing situation in... Oh, you get a microphone from there.
Yes, sure. Thank you. I think that the German publishers just feel that, that they don't feel they need to worry about media freedom in Eastern and Central Europe. They are in it for themselves, but obviously they should be worried about it, particularly with the war going on and propaganda increasing. But they don't seem to make that connection. What is at issue there mostly is the transparency clause, and they are worried to reveal too much of their business doings. For me, actually, the trust that in this survey, in this poll, the trust that people expressed in the EU to be able to solve problems was actually the most positive thing I've seen in this poll, because obviously usually when you start something like that, the Media Freedom Act, the first version will never be perfect, but it's a good start, and I absolutely agree with you. It's really important to collaborate on this and to really address the issues that arise about what could be maybe cause problems, what could be unfair, but just blocking it from a lobbying point of view is I think it's not acceptable. in Germany, the pressure is not as high, or the pressures on media freedom are not as high as for example, even in Austria. So it seems, but just recently it was discovered that Matthias Döpfner, the CEO of Axel Springer, he made this statement that, you know, I'm the boss, I can tell what's going on, or what's been written, what's been published in our biggest tabloid, Bild Zeitung. So that should actually give people some things to worry about, also in the German context, even though in Germany press freedom is not as threatened as in other countries that we were just looking at the results here.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other pressing questions from the audience? Okay, please, a follow-up.
Can I just add to this question on the impotence, the supposed impotence of the European Union and the Commission? The problem is that we have been contributing to the rule of law report every year, explaining what is wrong. And we have also been asking the Commission to do something. The problem the Commission had was that they didn't have the instruments to do something. They didn't have a law to do something. This is still questioned, by the way, in Germany as well. So what Věra Jourová did was write a law. She's written a draft law. And now that draft law is being attacked by, I'm not talking about the governments, but actually Germany is a very big problem, but the publishers. And no one seems to know about this. In fact, I seem to be the only person on the beach talking about this, and I'm feeling pretty lonely. So that's my answer to you. The European Union has created an instrument to do something, and then you say, oh, it's not going to do anything. I agree about Hungary. I know what your problem is. You keep on losing elections. It's like us. But, you know, this isn't... journalists, I think, should really start thinking about what their role is, what the implications are, etc., etc. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we should also... I think there's a certain danger to turn this into a war among the journalists. I think it's not about if journalists complain or not. In fact, it is for the governments to be held to account, to provide and serve the interests of the populations, and media freedom and editorial independence is among those very high-held values of our societies. And we are sitting here, and we heard it from Adam Michnik also at the beginning of our presentation, who has fought for his entire life as a journalist for the freedom of opinion and the freedom of media. And I think this poll, and that's what gives me actually some optimism, although the situation is quite hard in some of the countries that we have been asking to respond on media freedom issues, the responses from the people who were polled are so sophisticated and are really sort of in the room with this debate, in the room with the European Union, much more than we always think. And I think that they are asking for not only for European legislation, but also for governments to be taken to account for what they do to free and independent media. So I think we should take this actually as more of an optimistic approach, that we have very, very good results in this poll. We have a lot of what we heard on the panel also today. We have independent journalist outlets fighting in Hungary with Veronika Munk, or with Bart Wieliński here in Gazeta Wyborcza, or in the Slovak Republic with Denik, and of course also the organizations like Reporters Without Borders, who are sort of helping to provide a safety network, with Dorota's story that we heard, where you can still, even in this situation in Poland where the judicial situation is so difficult, you can go and you can try to get justice for yourself and for journalists in general. So I think it's very important that we keep also our goals in mind, which are that we are all in this together and that we are fighting for more editorial independence, for media freedom, even under the situation of authoritarian governments trying to suppress it. And they are the enemy in that case, and they might be our friends if they understand that. I think we should take it outside. We have a network lunch provided for everyone, and everyone can step up with questions to all of the panelists who will be very happy to answer them. And I want to thank all of you for all your hard work in the last month, especially, of course, Hanna Schreibova sitting in front of us from Economia. Thank you very much. And especially to our hosts at Gazeta Wyborcza, of course, because that's a very good place to be, to talk about pushback against government interference in media freedom. Thank you very much to all of you.
Dziękujemy bardzo. No i zapraszam na właśnie lunch. Drobny, niedrobny, ale w każdym razie posilający.